Good. Here we come.
There you go. Says live.
So setting up for webinar or Facebook Live. Done redirecting to Facebook Live. We are live. All right, Dr. Patty Ann, awesome to see you. Thank you for this idea.
Oh, great to see you. It was worth the effort. It will be worth the effort, I promise.
Totally worth the effort. Yeah, thank you for this idea of doing a Facebook Live together and talking. You had some ideas just related to kind of what people are going through right now. I mean, obviously, we're clearly in the midst of the whole coronavirus and the COVID-19 and probably at the beginning of a bit of an economic meltdown. So what are you hearing and seeing out there?
Okay, so, I mean, look, we all know we're in the middle of this pandemic, right? And I've heard you say this before, so this is no new news, but it is important to reemphasize. This is a crisis, but we've been here before, right? Throughout history, we've had crises. So what I'd like everybody to think about is the crisis in the medical profession. That term just means a turning point, right? So we're at a turning point in our business, in our society. We will come out of this totally unchanged. The issue that's making everybody so anxious, there's a couple of things, and a lot of it has to do with the speed at which this is happening, and it's happening simultaneously. So everybody is anxious, and it's normal, natural. It's actually healthy to feel anxious in the midst of a crisis. It would be a little weird if you didn't, right? Right before a test, you get a little anxious, so it motivates behavior to study. Before a sporting event, you get a little anxious. It motivates you to perform. Yeah. However, sorry.
No, sure, that's right.
Right? So what's going on now, though, however, is that anxiety, when it's left unchecked, turns to fear, right? And now you know the fear acronym, right? False evidence appearing real or accepted as real. So when the anxiety is unchecked, it turns to fear. Fear is a future-based emotion, right? We become afraid of the future because it's the unknown. Totally. And I'll talk more about too much information in a couple of minutes also. So we're being fueled with all this information that half of it's not accurate, right? It's not true. And then that fear turns to panic. So we have the anxiety left unchecked, turns to fear, turns to panic. So here's what happens, Cameron. We go into the grocery store to buy chicken, toilet paper, and hand wipes. And the entire store shelf is empty. And we see that. And it feeds into that anxiety and fear. We become panicked. It reinforces the false belief that it's the end of the world. And then the vicious cycle continues. And that's why everybody is walking around so incredibly anxious, and it's gotten out of control. So what I thought we would talk about today is how to decrease people's anxiety in the midst of this crisis, because all the media talks about is it's the end of the world, this is happening, the numbers are going up, you see charts where you just look at the picture and it increases your anxiety, and it's not helping, right?
Well, I want to add to this is something else that's taking the anxiety level to another level. So social media has only been around for 13 years. Facebook only launched in 2007. Twitter launched the following year. LinkedIn, you were only able to really share things about 9 years ago. So we've only had the ability to actually share a lot of this information for the last 12, 13 years. And people are sharing more than they ever used to. So during prior economic crises or even during wars, World War II, you read the newspaper, you might have listened to the radio, and then you talked to people.
Right.
But you didn't have 100 other people sharing it with you all day long.
Absolutely.
During 2001, with the economic crash, when the NASDAQ crashed by 78%, you might have read it in the newspaper, heard it on the radio, saw it on the news, but then you had to talk to people to actually get more. Right now, we're being bombarded with that. So that's step one. Part two, though, is something called the filter bubbles. And Google and Instagram and Facebook have created these algorithms to feed us more of the news that we're looking for. So I was at the main TED conference about 10 years ago, and the head of Google search came on and gave a talk about filter bubbles. You can go on TED, if you look up TED.com filter bubbles, it'll give you the actual video. And it talked about how everyone's search algorithms are giving us different results based on what we've seen before. So as an example, you searched up your favorite restaurants. Yours would be filled with restaurants from the Philadelphia area because you're from the East Coast and the Philly area. Mine would be filled with vegan restaurants because I've been vegan for the last 3 months.
Right.
If we searched up, what's happening in the world, yours might be filled with more left or more right wing than mine, vice versa. I have a friend who's all into all these conspiracy theories.
Oh, Lord.
Being bombarded with more and more conspiracy theories where I've never watched one, don't care about them. So my feed isn't filled with any of those.
Right.
So what happens is we get a lot of this confirmation bias showing us more and more of what we already believe, and we're being fed more of this, which really feeds into the anxiety as well. So I think that's kind of another part that we need to be cognizant of for everybody is we're self-feeding ourselves without even recognizing it too.
Absolutely. And what's going on, and the difference with in the past was there wasn't the 20, you have the filter, right? So if if I Googled watch, every time I turn on on my computer, I go on the internet, a watch will come up, right? It's all these different watches. So they're tracking what we're interested in. And it's the concept that I call that is we are being flooded with information. And what's dangerous now, and to your point, didn't happen in the past, is much of this information is not accurate. And we have to remember that fear, and it sells. So the media goes crazy with this. And we have people blogging, doing podcasts. All of a sudden, the guy next door who is a butcher is now an expert in the coronavirus, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like when you became a parent, all of a sudden, everybody was a child psychologist. And then we realized they don't really know more than we already know. So what's happening is we have...
At the main TED conference last year, I spoke to someone who broke the story on Cambridge Analytica and how Cambridge Analytica is not a bad firm. They're just a marketing firm that has all the data points, and they sold to the right-wing organizations so they can take a story and drive traffic towards it and send it to a group of people that could be influenced. So there's a lot of stuff happening right now that's making us anxious, but how do we deal with the anxiety? How do we help people with this anxiety?
And to your point, that's why Facebook have the ads, right? It targets your audience and it goes right to it. It's effective. Okay. Yeah. So I'll go back to the media because we there's a strategy for that, but let me just go back to the beginning. You can put 10 people in a room facing pretty much the same crisis. And out of those 10 people, every single one of them may have a different approach to it. So here's what I want people to understand. There's a lot about this virus that we cannot control. Undoubtedly, I'm not going to minimize it. I don't want to lessen it. However, we must control what we can control. And the absolute most important thing in the world that we can control is our mindset.
Well, it's interesting. What you even started with, I think, was almost accepting the fact that it's there and it's real, but just let it go a little bit. Like, okay, it's there, the coronavirus is there, it's real, it's scary. Now, what can I control?
Right, but exactly. And when you control your mindset and your attitude, you have in a crisis, you have two choices, right? You can look at this as gross oversimplification, but two choices. This is Armageddon. And if it's Armageddon, what do? You put your head in the sand, you hunker down, and quite frankly, you're defeated. You're defeated, right? Because you've taken all possibility of choices away from yourself. Sure. But if you look at this from the mindset of this is a challenge. This is a challenge. Dude. Are we up for it, right? And then with that perspective, we're all facing the same challenge. But with that perspective, that mindset creates the choices that we would then make. But you can't see choice and opportunity if you're not looking forward.
Well, it almost reminds me of the serenity prayer that's, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The reality is people got to recognize they can't change the situation we're in. We just have to decide what we're going to do with that, right? Is it happening for me? Is it happening to me?
Right. And also what we said earlier, right? Fear is future-based. So you reference this all the time. I love Man's Search for Meaning from Viktor Frankl, right? Who survived the concentration camps? Those who had the will to live. They had a reason, and then they made choices to keep them alive. So How are we going to keep ourselves alive, our business alive? Will we be transformed? Is this cataclysmic change? No doubt about it. But nothing great has come that hasn't been an uphill battle.
Well, I talked to a group of CEOs a couple of days ago, and I said one of the things that's really important right now is for our employees to understand that we get it. We know exactly where we are right now, and that we accept that, and then to say, okay, this is where we are, we get it, but we're moving forward. This is where we're heading right now. This is where we're going. We've got a question from Jonathan Kaiser, who's in the commercial real estate business. He actually helps tenants negotiate their leases with landlords. And Jonathan's question was, can you share what business leaders should do thinking about today in this crazy environment that we're in?
Absolutely. So, so one of the first things that any leader needs to do now is to educate themselves. All right. Know what the facts are, know what the facts are not, more or less, and be willing to admit what we don't know. Because as a business leader, if we convey that message to our people, there's an authenticity to that. There's a genuineness to that. They will then feel safe. People need to feel, our families, our community, our employees, they absolutely need to feel safe. You must be the calm in the eye of the storm, and you must have a voice that rises above the herd. Well, right? I think that's what a leader does.
And when you're also saying that the leader also has to admit, in some ways, I don't have the answers to this stuff, it resonates as true and real. And that's why people kind of gravitate towards that. When you try to pretend you've got all the answers to it, they resonate in a different way. Your words and your tone comes off differently, and they know you're kind of full of it. So I think that's
they will get scared. They will become afraid. The other thing that a leader needs to do is they need to bring their team together, because they know they don't have all the answers. And even though the company has the same mission overall, that's the baseline, every single person will bring a different perspective. And that will be the start of recreating what your business will look like when we come out of this, because it will look different. It will be transformed. But as you've said, some of the greatest companies, some of the greatest inventions have been born in this fire, because it's no longer what should we change? It's what do we have to change, and change we will, or we won't be here. It's a necessity, right? So that's why I think it's important for business leaders to be honest, authentic, gather around the people, see what they're doing, see what they're feeling, get their perspective. And then the other thing that's important, and you'll appreciate this, Cameron, is from a communication perspective. We don't need to be inundated with more information. We need to be judiciously communicated with. People don't need more information. They need wise information. So what we were saying earlier about how to decrease the anxiety, absolutely limit the amount of time that you goes to the media. You do not have to be up to date every waking minute of every day. You don't. It will consume you. You will be overwhelmed, and only go to the reliable sources. And quite frankly, as far as I'm concerned, it's the CDC and that Brooklyn boy, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Everybody else doesn't know any more than anybody else. So make sure that you're filtering your information, right? Because the analytics will know, hey, follow this guy. They're following, this is what they want to know. And it's fear mongering, and it will make you more anxious. So as a business leader, make sure you're educating yourself from the appropriate sources, and then judiciously communicate what people need to know. And it's not changing that rapidly.
So what would some specific tools be, or some specific things that leaders could do, or even individuals could do I always talk about CEOs and COOs need to protect their confidence, that they need to protect their the faith in themselves and the business and their team. And what are the things that they can do to protect that confidence and feel, kind of catch their breath to then be able to move forward during the storm?
Okay, so great question, Cameron. I had no idea you were going to ask that. So one of the best ways to do that is to manage your own emotions. All right. Have the self-awareness, be aware of what you're feeling. And find a way to get to a good place with that. And one of the best ways to do that, as we all know, is to do the deep breathing, and do that on a regular basis. And do not communicate with your team until you are aware of how you are coming across emotionally. Because if your emotions are disconnected from what you're saying, that discrepancy will that will freak your people out. So if you say, be calm, it's okay, it's okay, it's calm, it's okay, they're gonna freak out.
I talked to an entrepreneur about a week ago, and they were really panicking, talking to a couple of their partners on a call about, we have to do this. If we don't do it, we're going to go bankrupt. I'm like, you can't say those things. You need to actually calm it down. Even though they're true, you need to have that calm, cool, collected kind of persona. So, or you need to be that way. So I said, one of the few things that entrepreneurs need to be doing right now is work less hours, not more. You hit a point of diminishing returns, right? So work on the critical few things versus the important many right now. Pretend that you could only work 2 hours a day and try to work, maybe 6 to 8 hours a day, but not 16. Take care of yourself and getting exercise and getting fresh air and being healthy. If you're going to have a drink, have one, not 6. And it's really kind of just taking care of ourselves, because we're that healthy mind and a healthy body. We're the racehorse that needs to come to that event. So I think the entrepreneurs, more than ever in a wartime situation, need to show up calm and thinking and kind of strategic in all this as well. What are your thoughts around how to take care of themselves?
Absolutely. And what you're saying about working 2 hours, and quite frankly, this is a best practice anyway of business, prioritize, right? You're triaging. What's the most important thing that needs to be done now? And make sure that gets done. And again, leverage your team. Keep the lines of communication open, because things are pivoting so quickly that you need to make sure that your door is open, that people have access to you and you have access to people, because you might need to change on a dime. The way you wake up in the morning and what you're prioritizing might change by noon. And since I said that, Cameron, the other thing that's very important to do is start your day every day by being intentional. Now, it might not go according to plan, but absolutely create an intention. It gives you the mindset. It gives you the focus. Do not be scattering, putting out all fires all over the place. Be prioritized and be focused based upon the intention that you set for the day. Very critical. Otherwise, you'll be, running as fast as you can in place and go nowhere. It will create tension and stress and anxiety in your team, and nobody will be productive.
Yeah, we actually covered some really good tools in our book, The Miracle Morning for Entrepreneurs. Hal Elrod and I wrote that book together a couple of years ago, and we talked about the morning savers. The morning savers are an acronym. The first S is for silence, and it's just starting your morning off with a minute of silence, lying in bed, listening to what's going on around you, just kind of settling into the sounds and of where you are, your environment. And the A is for affirmations. So it's having some morning affirmation that you have. Well, I was doing some work with you a couple of years ago, and mine was, I'm very confident and gaining confidence each day. And I had that morning affirmation that I would repeat to myself until all of a sudden it became normal and true. Then you have your morning visualization, and that can be reading your vivid vision or thinking about what your day is and setting your day with intention, visualizing maybe a meeting or a call you're doing with your team, thinking about that and kind of planning it in your mind as to how it's going to look and feel, so that you go into it in that moment with it becoming more instinctual. The E is for exercise, even if it's just some quick little thing like doing burpees or push-ups or something to just get your blood flowing, a 7-minute workout. Some people like to work out later in the day, but doing something in the morning to just kickstart. The R is for reading, and it's just giving yourself kind of 15 minutes to read or even listen to a podcast or listen to an audiobook, just to absorb some growth, whether it's personal growth or spiritual growth or business growth. And then the last one, S, is for scribing, and that's when you journal or you use a 5-minute journal or you just write down ideas, and it's just to get the thoughts out of your mind. And those are really good success habits, I think, is what you're talking about, starting your day with intention. What it does is it grounds us. And I think another one is gratitude, right? Just really practicing gratitude for,
oh gosh, yeah.
Like, this is such a first world problem that we're going through. I mean, when this coronavirus hits the third world, that's going to be scary for them. Like for us, you know, we can go and pick up drive-through food at a restaurant. We can go get our coffee still at a restaurant.
Right.
We've got Netflix and TV and Sonos. And, you know, most people are in pretty good shape, especially in the entrepreneurial community, that I think we have to practice gratitude for the fact that we actually have a business that we can be running. We can make our own decisions. We're not relying on somebody else to tell us what to do all the time. We didn't just get fired in our jobs like some people have been laid off. So, you know, practicing gratitude as well.
I can't believe I forgot to mention gratitude, but absolutely. And we know the science behind that. It's the number way to make yourself happy. But a couple of comments on what you just said. So the other day, my husband and I were doing our walk 6 feet apart, right? Social distancing. There was in our neighborhood, and there was a little old Italian lady that was walking, you know, appropriately away from us. And she clearly wanted to talk. She was clearly, and with her beautiful Italian accent, she's telling me about, you know, her daughter, who's a genius attorney in the city. And I'm like, you know, all right, here we go. Then she said, so I wish I could do an Italian accent. I can't. Then she said, so then I said to my daughter, I said, I've been through so many crises. I'm 85 years old. I lived through World War II. We had no food. We had nothing. We were afraid that bombs will literally to drop through this out of the sky. And then she said, this is nothing.
Yeah.
I get to take a walk. I have to wear a mask. So it's the gratitude and the perspective, and business leaders, and bring to your family as well as a leader. I mean, it's so true. We control so much of our lives. And for the younger crowd that's never been through a crisis before, they need the wisdom of the older people that have been through a crisis before. And maybe the older people, the elderly, need the wisdom of the social media aspect and how to get on Zoom and how to FaceTime and how to stay connected. Like, don't allow yourself, a crisis can make us expand our world. Don't allow it to diminish it. Like,
I think some of the baby boomers and traditionalists, the seniors, really need some education around social media to understand that they're inside of their own filter bubble and they don't understand, you know, that they're getting more and more of the news that they comment on and like and share, and they think that's the entire news cycle, and it's not. And it can build an awful lot of fear. I have somebody that I know that got into this whole conspiracy theory and was thinking that it was the devil that's making all this stuff happen, and it was starting to spin her crazy. And I'm like, I hadn't seen any of the stuff that she was watching, because I'm not on that rabbit hole. I go down different rabbit holes.
Exactly. You really have to limit your amount of time reading about the information and where you get your sources. The other thing, Cameron, that you were saying was, as a business leader in this situation, there's 3 things you need to look at. You need to look at, okay, what's the pain that I need to go forward? Like, what's the pain that's going to be inflicted if I do, or what's being thrust upon us if I do a certain action? Then what's the gain to that? What will the company gain? And then execute. You have to do something. If it's right, fight, or freeze. If you do nothing now, you will be swept away. Do not allow the anxiety, the fear, the panic to paralyze you. But you want to act judiciously. You want to be focused.
Yeah, and I was talking to another group of CEOs the other day, a call that I did with my COO Alliance group, and I was saying that we also need, as leaders right now, to get our teams to rally around the fact that, okay, we're 2 or 3 weeks into this. It's going to be lasting for a long time. We need to actually start to move forward at the same time as understanding where we are. So it's kind of keeping one toe dipped in reality.
Exactly.
With our head and our business leaning out into the future, because in every economy, whether there's a huge crash or every health crisis, whatever it is that you go through, even one of the big wars, there were lots of businesses that did poorly. There were lots of businesses that did okay, and there were lots of businesses that did great. But the choice to drive your business towards something and stay ahead of the average, and I think a lot of people are preparing for the worst and so focused on the worst, they're forgetting that the best is a choice, and to drive forward is a choice as well. And that's
absolutely. And
paralyzation, right?
Yeah, and just like you said earlier, this is the best business practice for a business leader anyway. They need to be focused on what's going on now, but they always need to stay mindful and be cognizant of the future. And where are we driving? Where do we want our business to look like? No, but let's normalize this, okay? Nobody is doing business today the way they were 5 years ago. Because if you were, you're out of business, right? Yeah. So again, this is just an accelerated pace of the change. That's all it is, right? But if you are open, if you don't allow yourself to be overwhelmed with the fear mongering and the nonsense, which is not to say we're not acknowledging that the difference today is the social media, and it's happening simultaneously around the world, right? That makes this unique, but it's not the first time that we've been here before. So what I've been telling business leaders, Karen, is imagine that your company never existed. And you were creating it today. What would it look like? Knowing what you know. What that does is it opens all the possibilities.
That's interesting. Yeah. If you were creating a company in this environment today, what would it look like and how would you achieve? That's interesting. And what should leaders be doing right now with their teams, with their employees? Like, we've got a whole group of people that are, as I've been saying recently, that this is the time that leaders need to lead because followers are dying to follow someone. So right. How do leaders help our teams and our employees? You know, one is, I think, being very empathetic to where we are in the situation, but how do we connect with them and help them right now? Can you give us some thoughts on that?
Okay, great. And that's a really important question. So, and you know this, Cameron, a crisis doesn't make a leader, a crisis reveals a leader, right? Mm. It reveals you. So what you need to do is you do need to make sure that you are checking in with your team on a regular basis, not as a nudge and being obnoxious, but truly checking in to see how they're doing. And when I mean how they're doing, I don't mean what they're doing for work. I mean how they are feeling emotionally. And the best question to ask every time you get on, and I prefer a call where Zoom or whatever, where you can see the person, right? There's no other connection. So it's really important that you have the face-to-face digital, at least electronically. And the first question you ask is, how are you doing? And what can I do for you to make things smoother?
Well, and with the how are you doing, it's actually giving a shit as well. I think in many ways, it's almost less of what we say and it's more of how we show up, that leaders really need to truly show up and empathize with their team, that they're struggling, they're scared, they're worried they're going to get fired, they're worried their spouse just got fired, they're worried about their mom or dad that's like struggling, that we have to be very, very empathetic to their situation and show up in that. So when we ask, how are you doing? It's actually giving a shit as well, right?
Exactly. And we mean how, but you have to ask it where you mean it. You have to give them the opportunity to respond. And you have to probably say, I'm not asking about work. I'm asking about you as a person. The other thing that's very important for a leader to bring up is, I don't care how you show up on the call, but try to show up. You know, you don't have to have makeup on, just be there. It's okay. If your kids are knocking on the door and running around and you don't have childcare, what are you going to do? You know what? Excuse me. Like, allow them to, it's okay for you to share their struggle a little bit, right? I understand we don't want to, drown while we're trying to save the person that's swimming, but let them know you realize that these are different times. If they have to have, kids running around or noise in the background, it is what it is, right? Yeah. Hopefully, though, give them permission to be real.
I've been saying to some CEOs that the other thing to do right now is to be very cautious with how quickly we try to take them from the current state to the future state. That if they're not quite ready to talk about where we're going, don't force that yet. Just settle into it with them and move them forward a little bit. Like, build the trust first, build the communication first. And then when you know they can breathe, when you know they're settling in, when you know they can trust you, then you can kind of say, let me show you where we're going as well. But if you're so excited and talking about here, they still feel like you're not connecting with them, right?
Well, absolutely. And basically what people can visualize is, think of it as you're creating a holding environment. Mm. You're just allowing them to be, right? And that creates the connection, right? And that's the relationship. And if you do, And again, we need to do this as a business leader anyway. But now more than ever, people want to be allowed to just be, to be heard, to, well, not just hear, but to listen. What's going on? And I might not have the answer, but I want to hear it. Please, I'm here. Let me, what's going on? And that will go a long way, because what I'm telling people a lot now is we will come out of this crisis. We absolutely will. People may not remember all the nuances of what you did, that you changed the workday, that you had flexibility. They might not remember the nuances of how you got through every day, but they sure as hell will remember how you made them feel.
They're going to make sure they're going to remember how you showed up and how you made them feel, for sure.
And your clients as well.
So let's kind of wrap. I want to summarize. If you could give people like the top 3 things maybe that they could be doing in this time, what would those be?
First and foremost, manage your own emotions. Be aware of what you're feeling, manage them. Communicate authentically that you are there for your team as a person, as humanity, not just as their boss, but as somebody that genuinely cares about them. Because the first tenet should always be people first. We always say it. I mean, people know that. Guess what? Now you have an opportunity to demonstrate it.
I love it. Yep.
Right? And really, and then if I had to say a third, although the first 2, you can't go anywhere without the first 2. And then be intentional as you move forward. Every aspect of your life and in your business. And be willing, be open, listen, acknowledge you don't have all the answers. When you say that to people, there will be, well, then I don't have to have all the answers too.
Right.
They'll be relieved.
That's awesome. I'm going to add to that. And the only thing I've always been adding recently is that none of this actually matters. We're all going to die. We're all going to die. We're all just walking each other home. And this is just what we do to make money right now, that maybe we can also just hold hands and laugh a little bit and try to have some fun through all this, because this is just what we're doing to make money right now. And I think we need to get a little bit of perspective on this whole thing, that at the end of the day, we're also all going to die.
It's so true. And what I tell people is this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to reset the priorities in our life. We are all overscheduled. We are all moving so fast that we're disconnected from 2 things. From the people that really matter. Now we have opportunity to slow down and to make that phone call with that long lost buddy, call that relative we've been meaning to call, but we've always run out of time. Maybe spend some quality time with our children, and maybe talk to our spouse, because we're not running around doing so many, really talk, different opportunities. And just as importantly, which brings us full circle to managing your own emotions, we are also disconnected from ourselves. So this is an opportunity to reprioritize, really evaluate how I live my life. What do I value? Because at the end of my life, what will matter? Not the amount of money that we made, but the relationships that we were engaged in and who we impacted in a real way.
Well, I'm glad that you're one of my relationships. Dr. Patty Ann Tublin, thank you very much for suggesting this and for getting together today and talking. I know we're going to help a lot of people with this work.
You're welcome. And be well. And as King Solomon said, this too shall pass.
Exactly. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.